Well, hello and welcome. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on which time zone you're joining us from. I'm Benedict Rogers, the Senior Analyst for East Asia at CSW, and it's a privilege to host this webinar, this event, on the really important and tragic situation in Myanmar or Burma, looking particularly at the impact of the coup, which took place on 1st of February this year, and the conflict that has been going on for decades but has intensified since the coup. The impact of those two developments, the coup and conflict, on freedom of religion or belief. And this event is a part of a webinar series organized by the CFORB network, the Southeast Asia Freedom of Religion or Belief CFORB conference is organized every year usually in a country in Southeast Asia. We've met in the past in Bangkok, in Manila, in East Timor, and elsewhere in the region. But of course, for the second year in a row, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are functioning online rather than in person or in the region this year. The CFORB network is a coalition of organizations working to protect and promote the human right of freedom of religion or belief in Southeast Asia. And members of the network come from diverse religious and ethnic backgrounds, but stand together in unity to promote freedom of religion or belief for all. Joining us on our panel today are four very distinguished speakers to look at the issue of freedom of religion or belief in Myanmar or Burma. Our first speaker will be Salai Zauk Ling, who's the Deputy Director of the Chin Human Rights Organization. We are hoping to be joined by Jaw Win, the Director of the Burma Human Rights Network. I know he's currently traveling and he may join us a bit late, but we hope he'll be with us. Kin Omar, who is the chair of the advisory board of Progressive Voice and a well-known and distinguished activist from Burma, took part in the 1988 protests and has been advocating for her country ever since. And then we're delighted to also be joined by Nadine Menzer, the chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. Nadine has been chair since June this year and is serving a one-year term in that position. And Nadine has also been a long-standing advocate for Burma. I think we first met before you took up your current position through Burma work. So we're really glad to have you with us. So I think without any further ado, the only other thing I should say to our audience is please, when we come to a time of questions and answers, please send your questions in. This is being streamed on Facebook Live and YouTube. You can send questions in through those, and they'll be passed to me, and I'll field the questions with our panel. So without any further ado, our first speaker, Zauk Ling, will talk particularly about the situation in Chin State, which is perhaps at the moment one of the most grave and serious situations in a tragic situation that affects the whole country. So Zauk Ling from the Chin Human Rights Organization, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Ben, for the introduction and for inviting me here on behalf of the Chin Human Rights Organization. I'd like to start off by saying thank you to everyone who are watching us, the live stream, and also for the fact that at this very important juncture in the struggle, people are not forgetting us. And at a time when Chin State is particularly being hit hard by the regime's attacks. So if I may share a PowerPoint, if it's possible. So CHRO has been around for 26 years. We've been documenting human rights situation in Chin State and Western Burma for the last 26 years. So in documenting human rights situation, we have to go through a very rigorous verification process to make sure that our information is accurate and credible. So as everybody knows, the issue of religious freedom in Burma has been very serious over the last 3 decades now. Discrimination on the basis of ethnic and religious identity as a state policy has existed as long as the Union of Burma has existed. So there are legal and institutional systems that entrenched discrimination. And over time, the discrimination has manifested in different types and more pronounced during the years of the military regimes, including the current one, and more subtle during the democratic civilian governments. So if we look at the past 10 years of the semi-civilian democratic government in Burma, we've seen little attempt at trying to address the issue of religious discrimination by those who wield power in Burma. So in the absence of any serious attempt to address the very deep-rooted discrimination in Burma, we haven't been able to move forward on rectifying the wrongs of the past. So since after the coup, we've seen instances of very violent display of religious discrimination policy against the Chin, as the Burma army has tried to take control of Chin State. Militarization has been a major issue in Chin State, where the population is over 90% Christians. So in the last 2 months, we've seen movement of troops, new LIDs, as many as 9 light infantry divisions being sent to Chin State, and these divisions have left a trail of destruction and death in their path. So we have existing militarization on top of the current troop buildup across Chin State. As you can see, we now have new LIDs moving into Chin State, and there's been destruction, and also destruction that includes religious buildings. So if you look at this map, at least 23, we have documented at least 23 churches being destroyed since the coup. Some churches were deliberately burned. Some churches are targeted for shelling, army spraying automatic gunfire in the church, and soldiers occupying the church as army camps, and vandalize Christian churches that way. So we, out of the 9 townships in Chin State, we have documented destruction of churches, vandalism, and shelling of churches in at least 7 townships. So this violent display of discrimination is rooted in the state policy that has always existed, and I should emphasize this discrimination has been more or less violent or subtle, depending on what types of government is at that time. So all of this has led to displacement, especially the militarization and associated human rights abuse. So out of less than 500,000 population in Chin State, 70,000, at least 70,000 have been displaced since the coup. Over 40,000 people remain internally displaced in various townships, all the townships actually. And as you have seen in the last few days, or certainly the last 2 months, there have been destruction on a massive scale, military atrocities being witnessed in every parts of the state where army reinforcement and troop build up is happening. So we now have as many as 30,000, over 30,000 refugees having crossed into India in just the last 10 months alone. So imagine a population of less than 500,000, 70,000, more than 70,000 having been displaced. That's a high percentage of people, nearly 20% of the entire population having been displaced in such a short period of time. So in response to the violations and the serious discrimination that has been going on, we've seen condemnation after condemnation, labeling of the regimes. But in our view, while that has been welcome, it's not just enough with condemnation alone. So we need to have going forward, we need to have the full acknowledgement by all the people involved, the very history of discrimination and how it all started and what strengthens the discrimination policy. And I think it's important that even the current national unity government acknowledges the past wrongs that have been meted out against religious minority in the country. And we really need to have a new constitution in place that would give full guarantee for religious freedom for all. And especially our experience has shown that, for example, the institutions, including the Ministry of Religious Affairs and other state programs such as the Natala school system, have played a very important role in discrimination against religious minorities. So we really need a commitment to end these institutions, to abolish these institutions and all the discriminatory legal provisions that have enabled discrimination in Burma. So this is a picture that shows the site of the church that was burned down just recently on 13th of October in Phalam Township, as the troops were moving into Chin State to reinforce troops. So we have at least 23 churches being destroyed over the last 10 months, and a number of other religious buildings having been destroyed. So as we move forward, I hope that religious discrimination in the country will be recognized and acknowledged by everyone involved. Thank you very much.
Well, Salai Zhao, thank you very much indeed for that very informative, detailed, and really important presentation. And it's been very concerning to me in recent months how severe the situation is, particularly in Chin State, and yet how little international political and media attention there is, at least given the scale of it. So your work is really important, and I hope more people will be better informed and then able to respond to the crisis. We, as I said at the beginning, we hope to be joined by Jor Win, who we hope will give us a presentation on the situation, particularly for Muslims in Burma, but he's not with us yet. And so if I may turn to Kin Omar, who, as I introduced at the beginning, is the chair of the advisory board for Progressive Voice, and as well as being a long-standing campaigner for democracy in Burma, Kin Omar has also been a very steadfast and strong ally, specifically in the advocacy for freedom of religion or belief for all. And Omar, I wonder, particularly in the absence of Jor Win, whether you might share something about the situation for Muslims today, also the arrest of Buddhist monks who've opposed the coup, and anything else you'd like to share on this topic. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Thanks to everyone joining us today. And well, so basically, what we're seeing is I was just listening to previous speaker, my dear colleague from the CHRO. I want to start saying that I think that over the past 10 months, what has been happening in Burma, Myanmar, we actually have to have a different lens now. That's something that I just want to start sharing with all of you. This country, like Saul already said, that like never had a chance to actually do the actual nation building process. And in spite of the challenges in the last 10 months, under the non-stop day in and day out military attacks, this country first time had the opportunity, the best opportunity really, to address the root causes of the country's problems as people come together. That this spring revolution has brought everybody together, where the majority Buddhist Burma people had a chance to actually open their eyes and see that this military can do what they've been doing to the ethnic and religious minority nationalities. They can do the same thing also to the majority. I think at the same time, I see that for also the non-Burma minority ethnic and religious communities, this is also, especially for the young generation, I would say, it's a chance for them, a painful experience, and yet also for them to see that this military will do anything and anything needs and any means possible. They will do everything and anything to stay onto power, regardless of like what they have to do against any groups, including their own. So that's what Ben, you were saying of the Buddhist monks being arrested. Of course, this is not the first time the Buddhist monks stood up against the military dictatorship. Back in 2007, that was really the Buddhist monks-led saffron revolution that was also brutally cracked down, where the monks were not only arrested, but they were actually tortured and killed. And I think this is the time also that we come to be on the same page and realize that what this military is doing, it's no longer it goes beyond the human rights violations that we have actually talked about in the past. It goes beyond the discrimination against the minorities. It is, in fact, this is a group that we're dealing with is a terrorist criminal gang, and that is actually committing the international crimes, atrocity crimes against the people, especially for the ethnic and religious minorities. The severity always been, there's always been a higher severity when it comes to the attacks from the military. I also want to clarify that even though in fact today we are marking the 10th month of the military atrocities, the coup attempt, and I keep using the coup attempt, is because they are still attempting to take over the country. and yet they are not successful yet. And in fact, we can even say that they are actually failing, because this is like a decades-long institution, build a state within a state, where now there are like a cracks in this institution. More or less 6,000 police and military personnel already defected and joined the People's Spring Revolution, and there are very likely more will be leaving. And something like that has never happened before. So what I'm trying to to share with you is, in this very severely violent crisis that we're facing, but there are also some positiveness is happening. And that is something that we also need to grab on, because like I said, people have never experienced, the Burma majority people never really come to experience of such level of violence themselves. So the empathy or sympathy towards the ethnic and religious minorities in the past were very minimal, or probably never come to be apprehending because they never experienced it. So I think now this time there is this sympathy, empathy, and the bridge between the communities. And I think I started to see, for example, like 3-4 years ago, and particularly in 2017, when the Rohingya community faced the genocide, the majority Buddhist, as well as also the Christian community in Myanmar, they were under the military agenda, basically thinking that Rohingya community were not a part of them. They were not, the Rohingya community were not a part of Myanmar or Burma. So there were moments when you can't really find this solidarity. But now that time has passed, where the people started to really lend the solidarity towards each other. And I see that for the Muslim community in particular, because among the different minority communities in Myanmar, Burma, I see the day-to-day policy and practices of the discrimination and persecution towards the Muslim community in particular is by degree more severe than the other communities, and I think that's a fact. But of course, now with the Spring Revolution, we have to really see, like, how when this the conflict intensify across the country, that also this solidarity needs to move forward to the solution towards the new Burma or new Myanmar, which is the federal democracy. So I think that I see is the freedom of religion or belief, the issue itself. In the past 10 years, when the country was, like, quote unquote, going through the transition, or like people call it as a transition or fake transition, or now people have a different label, but it's very clear, right? For the past 10 years already tell us very clearly that this military never had a genuine intention to open up the country towards democratization, and it is already a very clear wake-up call to us. So, but looking back the past 10 years, when there was a little bit of opening, there were some chances to push the envelope further in that quote-unquote reform agenda. The freedom of religion or belief was never really an issue that was prioritized or given a higher priority or consideration by the government. So it was really the civil society who were more conscious of the discrimination and persecution against the minorities, who were pushing that envelope, try to do, but at the same time, of course, there was a huge challenge, because along with the country open up, there is certain elements, that's been bred and nurtured by the military, which is the ultranational Buddhist ultranationalism, and that Buddhist ultranationalism was, of course, used by the Buddhist religion was used particularly by the military for their political benefit. So I think that those years when we had some opportunities and yet we couldn't really move forward and address some of these long-standing, long-standing root causes of this country's crisis or the conflicts existed. So I think that we actually lost some chance, even though we tried to address it. But I think now is actually, this is the time that we can actually address it. But see, the thing is, I mean, I belong to the majority. Yeah, I'm a Buddhist. And I also see how this internalization is, regardless of how now people come together in the Spring Revolution. Yes, there is this overwhelming, like a solidarity and all of that. But at the same time, like something like this discrimination is racism and Islamophobia. This is quite deep rooted, right? It's really it's quite entrenched. So we really need to address in many ways. But what I want to actually take this current time as a more of a for us to move forward. This time, not leaving these issues out of the main political agenda. I think that's a key thing, because in the past 10 years, they were left out. And that's the very reason you continue to see the minority nationalities, continue to be marginalized, left out from the mainstream politics or the mainstream agenda of the transition. So I think right now, what I see is that there are certain entities like the National Unity Government, where, for example, the Chin communities leaders are there, the political leaders are there, the Kachin leaders are there. So I think there is this, like a current landscape of the Spring Revolution actually brought some allowing some of these spaces to come to be forming together, like the National Unity Government or the National Unity Consultative Council. Of course, it's not easy, than said, right? But I think this is the time that we should actually grab on. So my point that I want to conclude is all of these long-standing grievances of the ethnic and religious minorities in Burma, Myanmar in the past, it's way too long. I think we have to actually also come to the point of, among us, come to the point of agreeing that this military must be held to account by law. Their impunity must be cut. The perpetrators must be held to account. Otherwise, this vicious cycle of a discrimination, and yet that we can't really get to the solution. I think this is the time that the military is held to account, brought under the civilian, whereas that we move on to the new chapter of the country, which is the Federal Democratic Union. And I think this is the time that we have to actually join hands together. And I think also this is the time justice cannot be delayed. Thank you, Ben.
Well, Kinomar, thank you very much indeed for a very informative and important presentation with some signs of hope, even in the midst of such a tragedy, and absolutely 100% support your recommendation that issues of freedom of religion or belief and ethnic rights as well should be part of the mainstream of the struggle for democracy and human rights, and not left aside as they were in the past. So thank you so much for joining us. Just before I turn to our next speaker, just to say to those who are watching this, please do send in questions. We will have plenty of time for questions, and we'll go into Q&A session after our next speaker, and we'll bring Jo Win in as and when he joins us. But it's a pleasure now to welcome Nadine Menzer, the chair of USCIRF, the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. Thank you so much for joining us, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Benedict. You've been such a leader for all of us advocates fighting for Burma, and I'm just honored and privileged to be here. And of course, Christian Solidarity Worldwide has continued to produce such important content and do such important work in all of these countries. So it's really a pleasure. And thank you to my co-panelists, Kinomar and Salah. Really appreciate your presentations, and my heart breaks for your communities and how they're suffering, and how the international community really has not stepped up to stand alongside you. And so this program is important because it gives us the opportunity to talk about that hopefully will inspire change in more people to understand why it's important that the U.S. government and really all of us speak into this. As most people probably don't know, but obviously all of us here do, and this really started last November when Burma had its second quasi-democratic election in 10 years. And the military backed opposition lost. And the Tatmadaw, the military, immediately started making allegations of election fraud, in which independent observers debunked. These lies, though, laid the foundation for the Tatmadaw to lead this coup on February 1st, 2011, and install a military junta led by senior General Min Aung Hlaing. And I really like, Ken, how you said this attempted coup, because it's still in progress. They're still trying to take over the country. And obviously, the people of Burma have a different idea of what they want for their future. So since the coup, though, we have seen over 1,100 people die because of the violence of the Tatmadaw, which what Amnesty International has called using battlefield weapons, including sniper rifles, submachine guns, and grenades. Hundreds have been arrested. The economy of Burma is teetered to the edge of collapse, which has a huge consequence humanitarianly for the people of Burma. And of course, the response to COVID pandemic has been interrupted by all of this violence and the breakdown of state institutions. As you've heard, thousands have been internally displaced, with the hardest hit areas, as you heard, in Chen, where over 70,000 are displaced, but also in the Rohingya and Rakhine, Chen, Kachin, all ethnic and religious communities that have been historically marginalized. And, the communities targeted because the bulk of Burma's religious diversity is in these communities. And we really do believe they've been targeted because of their religious identity. None of the violence unleashed from the coup is entirely surprising, as the past 10 years have laid the groundwork for what the Tatmadaw would do when it was tired of sharing power with a civilian, democratically elected government. So USERF has reported on the poor conditions for freedom of religion or belief in Burma since 2000, when we first recommended Burma be designated by the State Department as a country of particular concern. The transition to democracy in 2010 promised changes that simply never materialized, with the Rohingya prevented from participating in the government. In 2019, I was able to visit Burma in an official capacity, where we met with government officials and were able to meet with religious communities throughout Burma. And then I was able, in my own personal capacity, to go to Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, where I was able to meet with dozens of Rohingya survivors who told the story of the genocidal and violence that occurred on August 25th, 2017. Most of the families I met with talked about how the military came in the middle of the night in what seemed like a coordinated attack, since all the villages in Rakhine, so many were attacked at the exact same time. Burned down homes, sometimes with elderly or sick families still inside, raping the girls and women. Most I spoke to had a family member killed during those impactful few days: a husband, wife, sister, brother, parent, child. One of the most impactful memories I remember was sitting with imams as they told the story, and through tears, how the mosques were defiled. First, their families were targeted. And of course, over 700,000 fled to Bangladesh, with over 120,000 internally displaced. It was the global community's inaction on holding the Burmese authorities accountable for the atrocities against the Rohingya community that has set the environment allowing the current chaos to escalate. Since the coup, we have seen the Tatmadaw target Christian pastors, priests, and other religious leaders in a way that they historically targeted Muslim clerics and leaders. As you just heard, Christian congregants of Baptist churches in Chen and also in Kachin state have been arrested and in some instances killed. We've seen Catholic churches targeted in Kaya and Kayen state. And there are still reports on attacks in the Muslim community, of course, with at least one mosque in Rakhine stormed by the military, resulting in the death of an individual sleeping inside. And of course, moderate Buddhists who stand up to the government, of course, are also being included and being targeted. And as you just heard about, houses of worship are being attacked at a higher rate than in previous years. So it's clear that religious communities that don't entirely submit to the Tatmadaw, they're not safe. But also since the coup, we've seen the United States issue a number of sanctions targeting perpetrators of violence, including the leader of the Tatmadaw, General Hlaing. The US government had previously sanctioned him for atrocities against the Rohingya, but have to mention that the US government has never mentioned religious freedom violations as justification for any of these sanctions. The US government also continues to provide funds through various programs such as USAID to vulnerable populations. The coup has also inspired new legislation in Congress, the Burma Act of 2021. This legislation has some bold steps that really follow USERF's recommendations that we have made in the past few years that are still appropriate. It would designate the president to identify whether or not the Rohingya violence constitute genocide. And so we are hopeful that that will come at some point in time, and disappointed that it has taken so long for this to be called genocide or crimes against humanity. It also authorized further targeted sanctions and further humanitarian assistance to vulnerable populations. And while it appears to have strong support in the House of Representatives, we've yet to see the same support in the Senate. So I'm not sure it has the momentum to pass at this moment, but we certainly hope that that changes and there is stronger support in order to get this bill passed. But it is important to acknowledge that some in the international community have stood up, particularly the Gambia. You know, in November 2019, on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Gambia initiated a case at the International Court of Justice against Burma, claiming the country had violated the Genocide Convention in its 2017 crackdown on the Rohingya. The International Criminal Court is also investigating the military's action in Rakhine. This past May and July, we at USERF held 2 hearings in a series on ending genocide that touched about these legal cases and the conditions of Rohingya within Burma. And, you know, these really have taken more significance after the coup, you know, for there to be a genuine transition to democracy. As you've heard, it really ensures justice and recognition for these crimes, and that the Tatmadaw will be held accountable. USERF has also advocated that the U.S. government engage with regional partners, including ASEAN. This crisis has demonstrated the need for ASEAN to develop its mechanisms to hold its members accountable to human rights standards. And though we welcome the unprecedented step of not inviting the military junta to meetings, that's simply not enough. They should be doing more. During the 10-year experiment with democracy, the Tatmadaw maintained a firm grip on the country's affairs and continued its assault on the Rohingya. And in part because of this, but also from a lack of domestic desire, the 10-year experiment did little to resolve religious freedom issues. The current crisis has allowed for a new reckoning through civil society on how they treat Rohingya, even a commitment to repeal the 1982 citizenship law that proclaimed that the Rohingya are not citizens of their homeland and birthplace. We're seeing solidarity throughout Southeast Asia for these democratic efforts, and it's encouraging, linking the struggle in other countries such as Thailand with those in Burma, especially for ethno-religious minorities. So in conclusion, as we look to the future, I think I'll echo what Ken Omar said. There needs to be accountability. There needs to be a future government needs to acknowledge these atrocities, and there needs to be consequences. And in addition, religious freedom needs to be a part of a future government. Religious minorities need to have a seat at the table for there to be the kind of Burma that these people who are protesting are standing up for. And it's so important that the international community stand with them and really raise their voices so the rest of the international community can understand how important this moment is in Burma right now. So thanks so much again for letting USERF share, and for me personally being able to speak into this important situation once again.
Well, Nadine, thank you so much for those very welcome and informative remarks. Really grateful for everything that USERF is doing and for your participation today. We'll go now into a time of Q&A, and we have plenty of time for questions. So do keep them coming. We've had a few in already, which I'll go through in just a moment, but do continue to send questions in. I'm going to start, some questions I'll direct to the whole panel, but others for individuals. And I'll start, Nadine, just following on from your remarks. A question has come in asking if you could comment a bit further on the US Burma Act and what it entails, and how we can all kind of get behind it. And perhaps I could add to that, maybe your thoughts on what other countries should be doing along similar lines.
Right. So the Burma Act really, gives a direction to the U.S. government to speak into this. I think one of the most important things, of course, is designating that this was in fact genocide and crimes against humanity. The Senate has been reluctant to move on that because of some relationships with Aung San Hlaing. And so it's complicated that it hasn't moved sooner in the U.S. government. And I think part of it is, they'll have a moment where people will rally around the people of Burma and then move on to other issues. And so that's why it's so important that we continue to have these conversations, because we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can deal with domestic issues here in the United States while still standing up for religious freedom in places like Burma. And so, I think the best thing if you're a United States citizen is for you to contact your member of Congress and say that you support this act. And ask them to support it, because that's the way that you break through the really busyness of these congressional offices for them to hear from their constituents. But I think social media has given everyone the opportunity to speak into these issues and to raise and really raise these important issues and these important voices that we're hearing today, to be able to help their voices to go further. So I'd really recommend that people do some research on the bill. There's so many articles about it that you could find, and we talk about it in our reports on USURF as well, and share that on social media. Share the survivors who are being targeted by the Tatma, and talk about what's happening, and that will help raise support that helps these kind of bills pass as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. A question directed to Kin Omar. You talked about soldiers defecting from the military. Is this something that is new? Has it happened in the past? And what are the risks for someone trying to leave the army?
Well, in our time, back in 1988, yes, there was also a nationwide uprising for democracy. And there were a short moment when civil servants, including from the police and army, also joined us, the students, on the street. But that was just for a very short moment. And then the military actually was able to seize, really take over the whole country, unlike this time. So the movement within the country was completely kind of like suppressed, right? But now, really, like soon after the Spring Revolution started, I think in the first 2-3 months already, the police started to leave, and then in the last few months, the military personnel were leaving. So this is the first time ever. Those who follow the Myanmar military will know, also will see that like something like this has never happened before. And I think it's also that's why, like, this time, this is the most opportune time for Myanmar to move forward, because all of these actors, including those who are who serve as a supporting pillar to the military institution, are now against this military. So anybody who really wants to see this country to move forward, this is the time they need to really lend the support. And these soldiers and police, when they left, they just didn't leave and do nothing. They are actually joining the movement and really trying to, they have this defection strategy. Not only the soldiers, even the soldiers' wives are also mobilizing themselves, reaching out to the wives of the other soldiers in the back in the military, and really like trying to mobilize and help out each other. And what they call is the defection strategy. Because they see, for them, they see that the more soldiers defect to the people's side, and then there will be less blood, there will be less bloodshed, there will be more chance for the Spring Revolution to win. So I think that's how they are approaching, and very risky for them. Very risky for them. I mean, it's risky for everybody that nobody is safe in Burma right now, but for them it's even worse. Is of course because. For the military, those under their order, under their control, are actually revolting against them. So if one soldier or one police was to defect to the people's side, it takes so much time and preparation for them to be able to bring along their pretty much entire family. Otherwise, that would be it would be like a death sentence for them, basically. It would be a treason, basically. So yeah. it's very risky compared to the civilians, of course. And like they had to think more than double, more than twice. But it's also very interesting that the young generation are really taken up, this, which in our time, the young generation joined the military with the thinking that they will actually change from within the military. But it is the military doctrine who brainwashed and changed them. But now it is the new generation is now taking a total different discourse in this spring revolution, joining the people. I take it as a very positive. I think we all know how this military, they sort of like tend to be the kind of like giving the outlook or the impression to the world that they are really the powerful one. But then you really know how they actually control or how they operate. They with the two strategy of the oppression and fear, and then the other one is the incentive, like a kind of like like through that very deep entrenched corruption. So that's how they pull like everybody under their wing together, right? But I think this is the time. I think this must be the time. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Omar. I'm going to take a question that's come in, but I'm going to slightly expand it a little bit and invite all three of you to respond to this one. So Nadine, you mentioned ASEAN in your remarks and said that ASEAN has not done enough. There is also, of course, the United Nations. There's the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Myanmar, but there's also the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. So I'd like to, taking one of our listeners' questions, but slightly expanding it, has ASEAN pursued freedom of religion or belief specifically in its efforts to act on Myanmar? And what has the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief specifically said or done on the situation? And I'll start with Zauk to respond first. Oh, Zauk, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, Ben.
No problem.
Yes. Well, I can't comment on what ASEAN has done on this situation on the basis of religious freedom, but certainly we need a stronger action and seriousness from ASEAN, as everybody, including the UN, is relying on them to spearhead this effort, international effort. So I think ASEAN play a very important role here, including religious freedom, because like many other ASEAN countries, Burma is a very diverse country religiously and ethnically. So there are many similarities that Burma share with ASEAN. So I think it's in the best interest that ASEAN seriously take this forward and especially insist on, the need to protect religious minorities and not having to talk about, the experience of 2017 again. Now we are seeing similar situation unfolding on the Western Front, and nobody is speaking about it. So I think it's very urgent that ASEAN takes seriously these kinds of recommendations and, fulfill its role and the expectation of the international community.
Thank you very much. Can Omar, do you want to respond to?
Sure, Ben. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm pretty, for a long time I've been involved in the different human rights
Omar, I think you've frozen, or we seem to have lost you.
Hi, am I back?
You're back. Great.
Sorry. Yeah. So I was just saying that like I've been involved in the ASEAN processes for a long time, and it's been very frustrating when it comes particularly to the human rights protection. In particular, the ASEAN human rights mechanisms are not something, they are not yet to the point that we can rely on them. Especially, like particularly anything comes in ASEAN is this like a non-interference policy, and the consensus decision making has always been the major stumbling block, especially when it comes to the human rights protection issue. So it's been very challenging. But I will say also now, especially with the ASEAN this 5-point consensus that like every, including the UN, is kind of relying on as if like it is like a roadmap to address the Myanmar crisis. But ASEAN has been very ineffective for the last 7 months since April. We need to actually raise more voices to them. I think like like we have to talk to them. We have to like really like let them understand this issue, like the F4B, the issue like the sexual violence against women, for example. Like the ASEAN actually has the declaration to stop violence against women, and yet whenever we bring the issue of the Myanmar military using rape and sexual violence against the ethnic minority women, like what happened in Chin State to Chin women last month, the ASEAN there's nowhere near to find them, like to talk about or bring those issues. But I think we have to keep banging their door, because especially now, since they are like at the block that everybody will be like a kind of putting them at the front line to address the Myanmar issue. So I think we have to keep addressing and just keep banging their door with the issue like FORB.
Thank you. And Nadine?
Yeah, so first I'll start with ASEAN. Well, I mentioned we appreciate them not including the military junta as part of acknowledging the government, and we do believe it's important that they're not treated as a legitimate government, because they're not. There's so much more they can do. They can, as you heard, pressure the government to stop this violence, pressure the military to stop this violence. And there are lots of ways these countries that are part of ASEAN can do that, and they could do that either privately or publicly. Also unhindered humanitarian access. As we know, the economy and all of the violence, it has been a very difficult time for the people of Burma, and it should be easier to get humanitarian assistance to all the people. And also, they should stand up for the people of Burma having that democratic path forward. So there's a lot more they can be doing, and we hope more is being done behind the scenes that we don't know about. And I also wanted to mention, you mentioned about the UN rapporteur, Dr. Ahmed Shahid. He's been terrific, of course, on religious freedom around the country. And there's also a special rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar, who's Tom Andrews. He's a former congressman, I believe from Maine. And he testified at our USURF hearing, I believe it was in July. And it was a brilliant testimony. You can go to usurf.gov and actually watch his testimony. So while he's standing for human rights, as you know, these are all human rights are interconnected, and religious freedom is an important one. And he's been a very strong voice. And so he, partnering with Dr. Ahmed Shahid, the UN has had a strong voice standing for religious freedom, but having that rapporteurs speak out on it is different, of course, than having, the Security Council and others have consequences for the actions. And we're just not seeing the countries of the world stand up against the military the way that we wish they would.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to go to another question. I have been told that Jo-Win hopefully will be with us shortly. So once he's in, I'll bring him on. But a question maybe I could ask Kin Omar and Zhao to address. The UN and ASEAN and others are trying to encourage dialogue. But if dialogue meant simply a return to the power sharing that we had before the coup, the 2008 constitution with all its limitations and restrictions and faults. How is that going to advance the situation, and particularly how would we be able to hold the military accountable if a dialogue simply leads to a return to the status quo that we had before the 1st of February? Omar, do you want to go first on that?
I think I will have. I think I'll have Brother Zhao take that first.
Okay.
I'll follow you.
Well, call me cynical, but I don't think that that's going to work, given the long history of the military using dialogue as simply a means to prolong and entrench themselves further. So I don't think that anybody's going for the status quo the prior to the coup. And I'd like to add here my personal thought about the current status. We are winning, and we might as well push for total change at this point in time. The enemy is wounded, and we don't have to, carry that enemy so that we can speak to them. And dialogue, I mean, as long as it leads to the status quo, is simply unacceptable. It has to lead to something, and the military has to show seriousness. And we haven't seen anything coming from the military that has been, positive, that would indicate that they are willing to negotiate even. So, I think dialogue at this point, we shouldn't even be considering it.
Thank you. Omar, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I would just say that just one point. I think last 10 years been it should be a very loud and clear wake-up call to all of us that no democratic transition can be successful or genuine at the gunpoint. I think we should not, like my brother said, nobody is looking to go back to before February 1 status quo. That's done. I think that this is the time, like I said, this is the time this country have out of this whole violence and crisis, this is the first time this country had the most opportunity to really move forward for all the communities and also to end this military impunity. And I think, if we keep calculating the solution of the Myanmar crisis, focusing or putting the military at the kind of center of the solution, no, I think that's always been the wrong calculation, I would say. And many actors, even now, like my brother said, we've been told and asked by many, is like, oh, why don't you guys negotiate and have dialogue? Like, well, what kind of dialogue are you talking about, right? So I think this now the whole country is very clear. People are done with this military and this military dictatorship kind of thing, the tyranny. So I think the only way to move forward is for the international community to really take the stand clearly with the Myanmar people, all the ethnic communities, the civil disobedience movement, general strikes, all of the different defense forces. This is the time the Myanmar people at the nationwide level needs to be supported to move forward with their aspiration for the federal democracy, and that's the only solution that the world can really help for Myanmar to achieve for a sustainable peace.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm going to go to a specific question for Zhao. What, in your view, is the motive for the Tatmadaw continuing to attack the town of Tan Klang when, I mean, it's been now many days of bombardment spread over October, November, and my understanding is that Tan Klang is pretty much deserted now. Most inhabitants had already fled. So why are they continuing to shell and attack Tan Klang?
I was born and raised in Tan Klang, and I have deep personal attachment to the town. And it's heartbreaking to see the military attacking over and over again, even after the people have all left. Well, in our view, Tan Klang, the reason for the attack, the target on Tan Klang is just one thing. Tan Klang represents a very strategic military place from which to launch an attack on the opposition resistance movement. The Chin National Front headquarters is located in the township, and we've seen leaked documents suggesting that Tan Klang would be used as a base from which to launch the attack. So, given that any kind of large-scale military launching pad, Tan Klang requires the population needs to be pushed away, and the old textbook of the military strategy, the focus policy includes exactly that. So if they can clear Tan Klang, they are planning on attacking the Chin National Front headquarters using 3 different columns or routes. So in order for them to be doing that, they need to clear the town. But over time, the opposition managed to cut supplies line from Hakka for troop reinforcement. So the battalion that are currently based in Tan Klang are sort of stuck. They cannot get any kind of troop reinforcement into the town or the area. So the soldiers then, started burning the place, targeting specifically structures that are still standing around the military base. Now they are based in 2 locations, one at the entrance to town and one in the middle of town. So if you look at the pictures, the aerial pictures from recent days, they are just clearing all the surroundings of the camp. And that includes churches and religious buildings. They seem intent on doing this until the very last house is burned. And one thing to note here is that before the attack on September 18th, where one pastor was killed and 19 houses were destroyed, the deputy commander of the Northwest Military Command, Brigadier General Min Aung Hlaing, summoned the town leaders of Tan Klang and warned them that their town would be burned to the ground if they keep letting members of the CDF, the Chinland Defense Force, into the town. So I think it's just a display of what he was actually saying. It's very sad that Tan Klang is slowly being destroyed, and the population has been wiped out of the area. We have 12,000 people now stranded on the border, and not having enough food to eat. The Operation Honorata might soon be starting now that all the troops have been reinforced and troop build up process has completed. So we are bracing for a major offensive in the next weeks, basically. So we will see more and more people, fleeing the area, and we have a crisis, a real disaster unfolding in front of us. And if I may echo what Nadine said earlier, that humanitarian access, the international community should insist, especially ASEAN and India, that humanitarian access be granted, so that these people are not left stranded without food and medicine.
Thank you very much, Zaok. I'm going to go to a question that I'll invite all three of you to respond to. And it slightly builds on your last comments there, Zaok, but specifically, what support can the international community, the United States, United Kingdom, European Union, and others provide to human rights advocates, journalists, leaders of the civil disobedience movement from Burma who have escaped to neighboring countries, Thailand, but also, of course, India? Everyone who has fled needs humanitarian assistance, but certain people, such as the ones I've listed, are in particular danger. What kind of protection and indeed relocation and other support can be provided? Maybe Nadine, you could respond first.
I'm not currently aware of what's happening here, so I'm making recommendations not knowing if the U.S. is doing that, but clearly they have a lot of tools in their tool chest to be able to support these communities. They can provide safe haven. There's funds and there's different programs the U.S. government has either internally or through civil society that they fund for emergency relocation, emergency funds to help human rights advocates. They can grant NGOs support to be able to help those who are stranded, and also to be able to provide tools, to journalists, to human rights advocates, to be able to have best practices to continue their work while they're in places like Thailand. So I do hope the international community is quietly working together and providing this kind of support to these communities. But certainly there's plenty that the US, UK, and others can do to make it a soft landing for those that are being forced out, that are doing such important work.
Absolutely. Can Omar, any comments on this?
I'm aware of some of the assistance from US and other European countries lending to those human rights defenders, activists, CDM, those who join CDM. But I mean, the challenge is the neighboring countries' governments need to be convinced.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be convinced that the protection is needed for the people of Myanmar, regardless of they are fleeing from the ethnic rural areas due to the bombing, airstrikes, or those who are fleeing from the urban and cities from the military's arrest and attacks. They all need to be protected. And also there is this principle of non-refoulement that needs to be complied by the neighboring countries, which right now is worrying for me to observe what is happening and what also could happen even worse. So I think it's important that the especially as these democracy governments really need to ensure that neighboring countries, governments like Thailand and India in particular, really comply with their international obligations for the protection and also for the humanitarian aid. I think it is, especially now with the COVID, like we're having that third wave of COVID now, and look at how this military deliberately attack and destroying the health sector and the COVID-19 measures in the country, in Myanmar, Burma. So I think it's really important that this global pandemic also has to be a matter of urgency. So if you ask me, like, what is the support that I would like to see the governments lend to the people of Myanmar? Yes, of course, immediate short-term kind of like a humanitarian and protection. But when I talk to those colleagues who had to leave leave the country, they don't want to go to US. They don't want to go to EU, to Sweden or UK. They don't want to go and live there. That's not their intention leaving the country. They want to actually go back to Burma, and they want to continue to contribute to the Spring Revolution. So basically, what we really need is, like, really tackle the root cause. My very worry is, Ben, for the past years, decades, like a few decades, you've been involved, Nadine, you've been involved in Burma Myanmar situation, and I'm actually very frustrated with the international, actors and policymakers of how they address or to tackle the crisis in Myanmar or the situation in Myanmar. It's sort of like putting the band-aid over a wound that is like cancer stage 4. I'm sorry, it doesn't work. Let's just admit it doesn't work. There are alternative solutions. In fact, the solutions that people have sacrificed everything of their life and livelihood on the ground, and they are there. They are there. They are the change agents. What else the world need? Myanmar people don't want the UN agencies to bring the rice and biscuits to them. In fact, in the last 10 months, they are not depending on the UNFPA rice bags and biscuits or World Food Program, like rice and oil. In Chin State, with this Mindat town, after Mindat town was seized in May, where are the UN agencies who could bring that? No, it's not the UN agencies. It's not the INGOs. It is the people themselves, the Chin people themselves, and the Myanmar people who are in solidarity with the Chin people who are trying to help, and the individual donors and small foundations who understand the nuances and the risk on the ground that Myanmar people are facing are the ones who are putting out of their heart and their hands and their financial resources to help out. So my point here is these intergovernmental agencies, including the USAID, I'm sorry, there are red tapes, like a bureaucracies just don't work for our people, So honestly, the US government can do a lot more to really address the root cause by pushing the members of the Security Council in New York to really step up to cut the root cause. The people are already on the ground. They just need a little bit of help from the highest level of like UN Security Council, or even if, because there is Russia and China, if they cannot move within their Security Council dynamics, well, how about, form the coalition of the willings and do something about it, I think that's what the people of Myanmar want. They don't want the rice back. They don't want the biscuits. What they want is help them, support them, stand with them to get rid of this military tyranny. That's what we want.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Omar. I over the last few months have been using a phrase that I came up with myself, but I'm very happy for everyone to use it, which I think captures what you've just been saying, which is that we should cut the lifeline to the military regime and provide a lifeline to the people. And I think that encapsulates the message you've all given. I have been informed that Joel Wynn is now with us. Before I bring him in and invite him to speak, Zoe, do you have any brief additional comments on this question that you'd like to make?
Just briefly to express our gratitude really to the state government and the people of Mizoram, who has been so generous in looking after welcoming the refugees, people who have fled Chin State. If it hadn't been for them, our hardship, our plight would have been unimaginable. And also, just to touch on your earlier question, you know, we are talking about ending impunity and accountability. And in order for us to be able to do that, the groups that are documenting human rights, who are gathering evidence, need to be supported. And without that kind of effort that goes in parallel with other support, um, it would be just a dream for us to be able to, hold to account those who are responsible for these atrocities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zaok. Well, I'm delighted to see that Jo Win, the Executive Director of the Burma Human Rights Network, is with us now. Jo Win, I know you've been traveling, and really grateful that you have been able to join before we end. We've had a very good discussion with Nadine Menzer, the chair of the US Commission on International Religious Freedom, Zaok and Kinoma. So we'd like to give you now about 5 minutes to share what you would like to share, particularly perhaps on the situation for Muslims in Burma. And then we may have time for some final questions, which we'll also ask you to comment on before we end. So over to you, Jo Win, and welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for your patience, Ben. I'm really sorry. I keep totally crazily busy and occupied here. So I'm very sorry for the late, and I'm really apologize, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me, yeah? Is everyone can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Oh, very good, very good, very good. Yes, regarding what situation, as everyone aware, and I think Makioma correctly, is on spot, saying that Burmese people, they don't care about biscuits and dry noodles from anywhere. But what we really need is so far, and even I'm shocked, to tell you that when I talk to the people on the ground, they want this situation to end, this military to end, no matter what price they have to give. They are ready to give. Sometimes they are asking us, why don't American military occupy Burma? That kind of crazy things. They said that, and I'm very sure people here were heard about as well. I'm not the first one who saying that. So their situation is really desperate, and that desperation is leading them to any cost, any price. All they want is end this misery, end this brutality of they have been facing since generation. So all since 60, 70 years we are facing, and especially with the ethnic minorities, you see, like Karenni and Kachin and Chain and all, they are until today in this 21st century. Why other countries they are thinking about to send a rocket on the moon to the moon, but we are still thinking how to, have a freedom of speech. So that is totally absurd for us. We don't want that situation, and in this generation we don't want that to see. And for the religious point of view, of course, in this new generation Z, that what I find a lot of encouragement and motivation from them, they don't care about what religion you are, what background you are. So that is the beauty of being a human being in this environment. So where we come from, our experience being a Muslim, you from childhood we are not able to play with the other people. We are not able to go to school and enjoy the right with other people. So being a Muslim or Christian, you pay heavy price in Burma. So right now that is the mindset in the young people, and we don't want them to lose that kind of idea and attitude. In my analysis, there are three groups I can tell you that currently we are very as a stakeholder, main stakeholder, what we see. One is you see that the military doesn't want us to exist anymore. You see that they have a very long-term strategy. If you look at the citizenship law and the military in Burma, they don't want Muslim to exist anymore, right? That is a strategy they have been playing, and they have been using it very systematically. And the second group is the democratic groups. Even that democratic group, you can divide two groups. One is progressive, what they really mean for, they believe in human rights and all this. But on the other hand, on the other group, they are all about political gains. in in any circumstances. All they care about is how to pass that secure situation, how to control the situation. So they will take anything, they will give anything. That kind of attitude. So that's really dangerous now. So what I see now in democratic groups like NUG government, and you see that NUCC as well, the way they treat the Muslim community is still not very different from what the way they did during NLD party. So the third group is you see the ethnic minorities. When we shelter ethnic groups, we are receiving tons of information from our community. They don't even allow to call them Kala in those areas, right? That is our Muslim community as in Burma, that very much attached to our heart. That thing, every from childhood, even in the school, in the classroom, our teachers use that derogatory word to call when they call us. So in one of my friend, someone I know from Mandalay, he is in Kachin state. He said that in Kachin, among the KI control area, they have a special warning that all the newcomers do not call Kala to the Muslim, or otherwise they will be punished, or they will be. So that kind of motivation and attitude we receive from ethnic minorities. So among these three groups, we are really danger. We have been threatened. We have been, look at the Rohingya community. They are almost eliminated from the Burma. So that kind of experience we have from Burma majority politicians. We also face so many discrimination. Although sometimes they allow us to at some small fraction to participate, but also among them, that what I see is today with NUG or with NUCC, those who are strongly supporting Aung San Suu Kyi are involved in the government, not other people. If you are strongly supporting the human right and you're opposing anyone, you will never get any position in that situation. So the discrimination is still there. We have a very long way to go. And that long way is, I think that at some point, what I'm feeling is, we have a very limited time span as a human being. We will not live forever. But as for our community, we have to exist forever here. We have to live this community. But at this condition, it is impossible, I think, that in the future, for the existence of Muslim community in Burma, there need to be something else, because otherwise the way they have been treated, they have been facing the persecutions and discrimination. I think that our existence is under the heavy threat now. So for that, we have to be very careful, mindful what we need to do, and this is not the way we can continue like that. So that is very important. But as a community, we are all discussing about it. Now, what should we do now? Because even current situation, we are facing two war at the same time. One war is we are fighting against the military. On the other hand, we are still have to struggle to convince the message to NUG or NUCC, or honestly telling you, NUCC even refuse to meet with Muslims. So that is the situation, and the people who they are allowing them is that people who support Aung San Suu Kyi blindly, those who stand up with her while she went to ICJ court, that kind of people who are inclined to move any soul of their principle for the position, that kind of people. And I'm not afraid to tell in the public as well. But we need to call spade a spade that time. This is the time. This is the right time now for that. So in my conclusion, I think, in order to success Burma to be a democratic country, we cannot allow any community left behind and continue to face what we have been facing. So this must be very important thing. So as an international community, you have to raise this voice against the NUG as well. NUG should not get any excuse that because we are now fighting with the military, so we cannot deal this issue. That is the same thing we have heard during the independence movement, during the revolution, even in 88 movement uprising. So after 88, during 88 uprising, I myself heard a lot of things, that kind of excuses. But when NLD party got power, the first thing they kicked out was Muslim community. So we had enough. So we need to be very strategic and pragmatic on the ground, and also international. We urging international community is everyone has to play their own part right now. So this is the international community need to help us raise their voice and question to the even NUG as well. When they can abolish 2008 constitution without any hesitation, why are they taking so long time to abolish 1982 Nazi law? Still, they are continuing that law. And look at the charter as well. There is an ethnic right. The same language when it says in 82 law is there repeatedly, but there isn't any. This Muslim community has no mention. They said that they argue that yes, that is a individual right, but there isn't group right. There isn't community right. So the whole 7 million, 8 million Muslim community has no any address here. So that is the very big issue we are facing right now. So thank you very much for everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Jowin. I'm really glad that you could join us and share those very important points. We have 5 minutes left before we leave, and so I'm just going to ask one final question for all our speakers, and it's a question that I think hopefully encapsulates many of the other questions that we don't have time to get to specifically. And it's a simple question: what can people do to help? People who may be watching this who are ordinary members of the public or activists, religious leaders, NGO leaders, and maybe you can take into account different aspects of the question. What can we do to help to speak out and to urge our governments to act? How can we support humanitarian initiatives? And how can we encourage the positive developments that we've heard about of people coming together in Burma across ethnic and religious lines and being more united? How can we build on that? So maybe I can ask Zauk to go first. And if I can ask you all to limit your response to about 1 minute, then we'll get through it all.
Well, thank you, Ben. First of all, I think for us here in Chin State, the situation is really urgent, and we've been trying to push for the Security Council resolution because the way the preparation are being made, all indication is that there's going to be imminent large-scale attacks on the Chin, and we'll see more destructions, more lives being destroyed, more people fleeing. So it's really urgent that everybody speak out on our behalf and raise their voice, because this is a critical moment. And if we cannot allow similar situation in the past to be repeating here, on our watch. So I really hope that people will take this seriously, and that more people will pay attention to what's going on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Zauk. Kin Omar.
For those of you who are, our international friends, whether at your individual level or as organization, there are full cut strategy that I would like to propose that you will actually take into your consideration to take the actions. We need to cut the financial flow to this military. For that, we would like for you, your organization, to raise your voice to your government, tell the companies from your country to stop or cut the financial ties with this military, stop making payments. I think that's one thing is really important. And in that, those who are in US, in that sense, we would like for you to keep banging the door to the Washington, D.C., to the Congress. Like Nadine said, we need the Senate to also support to get this Burma Act 2021 passed ASAP. And we also need to cut the impunity of this military. And how do we do that? We really need the governments to push in the UN Security Council for the UN Security Council to actually refer Myanmar situation to the International Criminal Court, or exercise the universal jurisdiction, like the Argentine court just decided. There are ways to hold this military and military leadership and their businesses to account. So that is cutting the impunity. The other is we need to cut the weapons, arms and ammunitions, including the dual-use goods and technology, going into the Myanmar military's hand. And we also need individual governments to act, as well as also for the Security Council to impose the global arms embargo. We would like for your voice raised to your capitals, your foreign ministry, your president, your parliament, to actually make sure that the governments actually push enough within the UN system. The other cut that we need is also the I said like an impunity cut, and then the financial cut, and also the money finance cut, right? The other cut is the legitimacy. The people of Burma categorically rejected this regime, giving up everything of their life. My question to the international community, particularly to those NGOs and UN agencies in Burma, what is there for you to lose? When the whole country that you saying that you want to serve are already against this military, which is illegal, criminal cartel, criminal gang, and a terrorist organization. So we want no international actors to give any legitimacy whatsoever to this military. The legitimacy cut. The last point is humanitarian aid, and also the resources to the civil society, human rights organizations, rights-based organizations, and the media who are struggling so hard to really push at this point. So that would be my request. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kinoma. It looks like we've lost Jorwin. So I'll give the final word to Nadine.
I think my recommendation would be to amplify these Burmese voices, amplify the people of Burma. And the best way to do that, follow these panelists on Twitter, sign up for newsletters for their organizations, follow their organizations on Twitter. The best way the best way forward is to follow these brilliant panelists and others who are standing up for their country, for their people. And if we all do that, then we will give them that empower them, as she mentioned. They don't want handouts. They want to be empowered to be able to stand up for the rights that they deserve. And by us amplifying their voices, it gives them that ammunition they need to be able to get what they're saying out to the rest of the world. So it's an easy thing for each of us to do, but if we all do it, the amplification of it can have a huge impact. And so I appreciate, Christian Solidarity Worldwide. I appreciate you, Benedict, for always focusing on the Burmese voice in making sure that this is heard, because I know I've learned so much today by listening to you and understanding what's going on in your communities, what you really want from the international community. And if we're doing that, then we're going to be able to be effective and be able to help the people fight through this coup attempt and be able to land on the other side where they have freedom.
Absolutely, that's a really great note on which to end. We could have. This is such an important topic, and so many dimensions to it. We could have gone for much longer, but our allotted time is up. I think we managed to cover most of the questions that were asked. Apologies to those whose questions we just didn't manage to get in. But all that remains for me is to firstly thank those of you who've joined us on Facebook and YouTube. Please share the recording of this with others who couldn't join us, and spread the word and use this webinar as a way of informing people. A huge thank you to our panelists, to Zauk, Kinoma, Jorwin, who was with us briefly, and Nadine Menzer. And lastly, a big thank you to my colleagues behind the scenes who've helped with the technology and the publicity for this, both at CSW and at CFORP. We will no doubt have many further discussions to come, but most importantly, let's take what we've heard today and turn it into action to help end this crisis in Burma, Myanmar, and work for true freedom and real peace for all the peoples of Burma, Myanmar. Thank you all very much, and I wish you all a good rest of the day or evening, depending on which part of the world you're in, and we'll be in touch again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Nadine. Thank you. So see you.
Yeah.
Great.
Mm.